Nigar Nazar is the first female cartoonist of not only Pakistan but also the Muslim world. She is the CEO of Gogi Studio and was nominated by BBC for 100 influential global women who are bringing difference in the world. She acquired her education from United States and believes that her time and exposure in US sparked the creativity.
I think it was because of my exposure to comic books in the US. I used to, like a lot of other kids, read a lot of comic books. In those days, there was Archie's and there was Little Dot and there was Lulu. There were a bunch of comic books that we would just go through. At that time, I think it was less books and more comic books that grabbed my attention.
Right.
And so I guess that's where the comic book or the comic art took to my fancy. I mean, I took a fancy to it. But I think it was my drawing or my talent for drawing, I would say, came more from the family, because my mother's family had my aunts and my uncles who were drawing and painting for hobby, and so I was exposed to that. And then also with being hooked on to comic books, I became very interested in drawing. And when I was doing my pre-medical, I was always drawing in the margins of my books, just drawing and doodling. Basically, when I was bored, I would just start doodling a profile of a pretty woman or a stiletto heel, a high heel shoe, a very, pretty high heel shoe.
Yes.
So, I would enjoy botany because you had to draw in the journal, and I would enjoy zoology because from time to time you were required to draw. So that was my fancy, and I would take the sketchbooks or the journals, the science journals of my friends who found it difficult to draw. I would just take them I would take and volunteer to draw for them, and I enjoyed it. And of course, I was caught because my teacher noticed that all the drawings were the same in the class of 28 girls, and I was caught. And she said, who has been drawing this? And I was caught. And so
that's a fun little detail.
That was the end of my volunteerism for the class.
You did not acquire any formal education in cartooning. However, you did join the Arts Council in Karachi as a student. What led you to the creation of Gogi, a young female who isn't afraid of speaking her mind? And what was your journey towards cartooning like?
At that time, the principal was Mr. Ali Imam, the very prolific and well-known artist. And so I joined...
I'm sorry, ma'am. The Art Council where?
This was Arts Council in Karachi.
All right.
Yeah. And I also started teaching. I started teaching art, actually. Art in a school in Sadr, I remember. So I would go I would give classes in the school in art, and I also joined the Arts Council as a student. But there was no one to teach cartooning, and there was no subject of cartooning, and there was no class. So I was just advised by my principal that I should just borrow the books in cartooning from, teach yourself cartooning. So I was teaching myself cartooning by borrowing one book at a time and writing notes from it, and, then returning it and picking up the next book. It was a teach yourself cartooning series.
Yeah.
So that's how I and he also said to me, I know there is no class, there is no teacher for you, but you know what you can do? Draw a cartoon every day and show it to me. As if I had already graduated in cartooning. So I tried my hand at it, but then, passion. So I had a passion for it, I had an interest in it. I think at that time it was more interest. I can't call it a passion at that stage. Passion for drawing, yes. but interest in cartooning. Okay. So there I was struggling with how do you create humor and how do you create a cartoon comic strip. But because I was such an avid comic book reader, I had the seeds of, comic art and comic.
Hello?
So I tried to invent cartoons, and that's the time when I decided that I have to have a character. And I said, okay, if it's going to be a character, it's going to be a female character, and it's going to be a woman, it's going to be a smart young woman. And so I said, anything that I don't have, I'll put it in my character. So I gave her big eyelashes, and I always those polka dots which I love. I was told by my classmate that, Nigar, you don't remember, but you had very thick and big eyelashes. And I said, okay. So that's how it came about. That and I joked once. I said, when one eyelash drops on from my eyes, then I add it to Gogi's eyelashes.
Right.
So interesting detail, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, that was my way of taking it out on her. And so and then I drew a cartoon for the annual magazine of the Arts Council, and that cartoon was accepted for printing in my principal, Mr. Ali Imam, saw it and he said, this is good, so we'll print it in the magazine. So that was my very first Gogi cartoon to be printed in the magazine. But while I was still teaching myself comic art, I was picked up by a newspaper editor, a newspaper that was just freshly released for a newspaper called the Sun Daily. So I was picked up by the editor to draw cartoons for the Sun, and I was asked to draw a comic strip every day, which was a big challenge, a huge challenge. Drawing a comic strip every day is it's no joke. It's a cartoon, but it's no joke.
Yeah.
So that's how I got onto, and I went through the mill, I think. I really went through the rigors of an intense job, an intense responsibility. So I was, and how should I say, I was running already before I could walk in this field, and then I just think I got into the role of it, and so I was producing a comic strip every day for the newspaper. Then I branched off into other newspapers in those days. I did some work as a freelancer for the Herald magazine, then I did it for the Dawn, and then the Morning News, and then the Daily News. And so I became a freelancer. And
Right.
then I also got into the television. So the TV was out. It was a new avenue. It was a new medium in those days. So I proposed to the producer that I would draw a story and narrate it. So I was telling stories by drawing stories, and that was fun.
Yes.
While it lasted, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that, and then I kind of got into the TV. So I freelance cartoons for the magazines. There was one magazine, Teenager. I art editor of the Teenager magazine and drawing cartoons at the same time. Then I was like freelancing and also working for the TV. So that was nice until I got married.
We'll love to know more about the concept behind Gogi.
In the beginning, Gogi was more a comic strip based on everyday life humor.
Right.
So whatever a normal, average young woman was going through in her daily life
Yes.
was portrayed through Gogi.
Right.
Gogi is very much her own woman. Gradually, she became very strong, independent, and she knows her mind. She knows what she wants. So she's like my mouthpiece. She reflects, and more so nowadays, in these times when young women are doing amazing things. They are just doing what they want to do. It was not so much like this in our days, back in the days. It was more like you had to conform to societal pressures, and that Gogi is very much her own woman. She's strong, independent, and knows her mind. She represents the progressive young woman of the 20th century.
Right.
And now, but in my days, back in the day, we were more conforming to the norms of society, the social pressures, more giving in to what is supposed to be done, and what should be done and in what way. Now my daughters, I find them so much more liberated and so much more independently thinking and deciding for themselves. And that's okay. But yes, Gogi was like the voice of the progressive woman who wants to do something in life and who wants to contribute towards her towards a nation building with her passion, or through her passion and her interests.
What struggles did you face in your journey as a woman cartoonist?
It was very hard. I would say it still is very hard. The only difference is that now, hard in two ways. When you are a freelance artist, it's hard. You don't get a paycheck every month. You don't have a regular job. And maybe the reason for that was that I was not a political cartoonist. Political cartoonists or editorial cartoonists are hired by newspapers, and they draw a cartoon every now and then, or more frequently in a week, and they get their salary. Here was Nigar Nazar, who was not a political cartoonist, although I did at one time draw political cartoons for my newspaper. I have a complete chapter of political cartoons in my second book, second compilation of Gogi books. But I was more interested in doing comic strips. I was more interested in showing the social side of humor in our lives, relatable.
So, in Pakistan, is the political side more dominant?
We're totally dominated by politics, and it becomes too much sometimes. So I just to prove that yes, I can do political cartoons, but I'm still not going to do them. I'm going to do what I feel or I like, and I want Gogi to be relatable to young women all over Pakistan and families, and she should be the icon of the lighter side of life in Pakistan. My very first book is called Glad to Know You Gogi. No, Glad to Meet You Gogi. So that was my very first compilation of Gogi cartoons. And then the second one came, it's called Gogi On The Go. And the third one was Going Gogi. So there have been compilations coming out after certain intervals. I have 28 books, and 3 are in the pipeline. And if it wasn't for this coronavirus, I was ready with my book on climate change. It's called My Tree Book. I was excited about it. And so not all like I said, 4 books are compilations of Gogi cartoons. The rest of the books were authored by me and illustrated by me, but then there were about 9 or 10 more that I illustrated. For example, I illustrated the book for the University of Oregon when I went there on my Fulbright scholarship. So that book was written for students who are fresh graduates. The first book from that university which published it was called Resume and Cover Letter, and it has Gogi cartoon illustrations in it. And then I came back from my Fulbright scholarship, and the university sent me another letter of agreement saying that we want to publish the second part of the book, which is, hunting a job and interview. So how do you give an interview when you are going for a job? So that also carries the Gogi cartoon illustrations, and that was very nice. It was very complimentary to me. I was very flattered that I had left the university, I had returned home back to Pakistan, but they still wanted me to illustrate their next book. It was an open competition for illustrating a book for the university, and I just entered my work in it. And out of all those professors and lecturers and students and graduates, graduates of fine arts, little old me, a Pakistani cartoonist, got selected for doing the job of illustrating the books. So that was very nice. And so yeah, I did the second book. There are some books that are written by authors, but I have illustrated them. That's how I came to talk about this. And then there are books that I have authored as well as illustrated.
Do you think with time there has been a shift in your work from humorous to more serious in nature?
I call them my days of fun and frolic. So from my days of fun and frolic, when Gogi was just carefree and just, I was doing comic strips which were very general and very local and very, light-hearted. Then I became more serious in drawing funny cartoons. So I was drawing funny cartoons with seriousness, as in my themes became, especially with the books. With the books, my themes became meaningful. I started addressing social issues. I did a whole set of comic books on social issues such as corruption, girls' education, women's rights, interfaith harmony, and there's one on extremism, then there's one on environment, but that's a light-hearted one. It's called The Garbage Monster, and that is a real hit with the children, and it's very popular. So I did The Garbage Monster, and then I did Health and Hygiene. With time, when one matures, then you start moving from the fun and frolic to things that matter. And you become serious about, you want to see your country. I love my country. And as a diplomatic wife, I have always represented Pakistan in the best light, with the best output. For every conference or every jury that I went to, I was very proud to represent Pakistan, and just to prove to the international crowds that in Pakistan we do have women who are not weak, meek, and submissive. Here's a woman who is drawing cartoons, and nobody's stopping me from it. So just to prove that. But then coming back to the subject, that how I had this transition was that you feel sad and sorry when you see the bad state of affairs, and you say that so many countries have moved ahead of us and gone beyond those struggles that we are still going through, and that's not fair. So you feel angry at why these problems are not solved.
You love working with children and bringing smiles on their faces, and your work clearly reflects that.
When I am doing work for kids,
Yes.
then I have fun. So, because if I don't have fun, why will they have fun? So I have to come down to their level and amuse them. So I did trauma counseling for the earthquake victims.
Right.
And I scripted there was a script, and I did it with the help of another writer, and we bounced off ideas, and it was a time of emergency. So we wrote out this script, and then we enacted it with the puppets, and it was very moving. It was very touching, because our audience were earthquake victims, and it was very moving. I was hiding my tears, because there was this little boy sitting in a wheelchair with the chadar from his neck downwards to his toes, because he fell into a tandoor. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how that happened, but he was burnt, so he could not put any clothes on. So he was in a chadar, and it's in my video, it's in the documentary that PTV made when we were at the hospital putting up this puppet show. And then I did murals for the children's wards. I did it for the emergency ward. There are 22 Gogi murals hanging in the emergency ward of the PIMS till this day.
Right.
And I had fun because I showed the characters. Gogi has got other family members. There's Bablu and Goti and Amir and other. And so one is playing, swinging on the neck of the giraffe. So I was having fun doing work for the kids. So I often try to do things for the kids because I know that I don't have to be serious anymore. I can just poke fun at them, and that's what I'm doing these days. Actually, I'm doing a program on the television on my channel on YouTube for kids, and I'm teaching them how to create art and craft from everything lying around the house, a straw, a beetroot, a potato, anything and everything.
What advice and message do you have for young girls who have a passion for drawing and cartooning?
Well, the first advice I would have is that you have to really let your imagination loose. You have to lighten up yourself. I can give advice on the draftsmanship side, which is that you need to be a good illustrator. You have to have the skill of drawing well and really well. And for that, all you need to do is practice. That's no rocket science. You just practice drawing anything and everything. If you're sitting, just draw, and draw. So that's the 3 rules of drawing well: draw, and draw. But as far as humor is concerned, well, really, it cannot be taught. It just either it's in you or it's not. So maybe you can read lots of comic books or lots of cartoons and just expose yourself to a lot of work that other cartoonists are doing. And so I would say these are the 2 things. 50%, more than 50% is humor, and the rest is drawing well.
Right.
And also, we don't have many newspapers, and so there can be only that many cartoonists employed by newspapers. So, and in any case, now everything is going so digital, that newspapers will slowly and gradually go to a minimum number. But the websites or, news websites will be there. And so there is no problem of space then, because I know that when I would approach the newspapers for drawing cartoons, then if I would give 3 and only 1 was published or 2 were published, they would say, we don't have space. So now everything is so virtual that should not be a problem. But I would say to the girls who want to become cartoonists that they should learn to draw well and really well, and they should, and they should try. They could go for illustrations. Even if you're not a cartoonist, you can still illustrate with good drawings, which is what I do. I engage illustrators to illustrate my books when it comes to a big project. And of course, I've also done telling stories through drawing cartoons for quite a few organizations, and they are all on my website or on my Facebook or on the social.
Right.
So that's my advice, and my advice is also that if you have a passion for it, go for it.
Right.
And just persist. Persistence is another thing that you have to carry on. And that's what I did all my life. I just persisted because I liked to draw, and I just kept on. Even if I remember the children were very young, very small, I would be at the hospital waiting for the report to be, given. And I remember, this is a very famous experience and story that I tell, and I enjoy telling it, that I had to go, the guy at the polyclinic said to me, "Ma'am, you have to come after 1 hour to collect this report." And I said, instead of going all the way back home and coming back, I will just finish my cartoon for the newspaper that I have to do. And I always carry my work around. So I had my cartoon spread on the bonnet of my car, and I was drawing it and finishing it. And of course, my work was finished and the time was done. And so I went and collected my report, which was great. so, so that's how you do it. When you really want to do it, I would get up at 4 in the morning, and while the kids were sleeping, I had 3 children, and I could only think with my brains when they were not disturbing me. And so I was getting up really early to do the brain work, to do my writing, and then I would just draw, because that just came as an easy thing for me. So once the cartoon was decided, I could just draw, but it had to be decided. So the draft, or the storyboard as you call it, was made, and then I could just work on that.
The best use of imagination is creativity, and Nigar Nazar is using cartooning for nearly 37 years to make the world a better place for everyone, especially children. Thank you for Life with Gogi.